It's over for you. Your soulmate medical report is on its way, proving that you soulmate is my beloved child. Something has already been sent, and once it reaches its destination, the uncertainty surrounding your soulmate may finally disappear. It is a medical report carrying information they were terrified to face, and the strangest part is that your soulmate didn't expect you to ever hear about it. For days, they had been acting differently. Quiet conversations stopped whenever someone entered the room. Their phone remained close beside them. Then came the appointment they told almost nobody about. They walked into that medical office believing they would receive a simple answer, but what happened afterward changed their entire expression. A second test was requested. Then another detail appeared that made the doctor look more carefully at the results. Your soulmate left without saying much, carrying one question they couldn't escape: what exactly had those tests discovered? Now the finalized report is on its way, and one specific line inside it could prove something about your soulmate that nobody around them was prepared to hear. But there is another reason this report matters so deeply to you. Your soulmate apparently wasn't only afraid of the medical result itself. They were afraid of what it could change between the two of you. Someone close to them noticed their hands trembling when the notification arrived saying the report had been completed. They asked, "Are you going to tell them?" Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. They stared at the screen before quietly saying that you deserved the truth, but they wanted to see the complete report first. Don't skip, because this is where the mystery becomes even more personal. There was something in their history they had questioned for a long time, something they never had enough evidence to confirm. The tests weren't ordered randomly. Your soulmate had gone looking for an answer. And when the preliminary information came back, it pointed toward a possibility so unexpected that they requested confirmation before speaking to anyone. Whatever they suspected, they now knew that the final medical report could prove whether they had been right all along. Then came the message they couldn't ignore: the document had been released and was being delivered. Your soulmate suddenly realized there was no more hiding behind uncertainty. No more saying, "maybe." No more pretending the question didn't exist. But instead of running away, they made an unexpected decision. They decided that after reading the report, you would be the person who needed to know what it meant. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. The report isn't simply closing an old chapter. It may explain why your soulmate has felt that something about their life never completely added up. And there is one particular finding they are waiting to confirm before they finally speak to you. Someone has already seen enough of the preliminary results to understand why your soulmate went silent, and when they asked what would happen if the final report confirmed it, your soulmate gave an answer nobody expected. They said, "Then everything changes." But what exactly does the report prove your soulmate is, and why does your soulmate believe that truth will change what happens between you next? The moment your soulmate finally saw the report, they didn't open it immediately. They just stared at the notification, almost as though reading those words would make everything irreversible. The preliminary results had already raised questions, but this was different. This document contained the confirmed findings. The answer they had secretly been searching for was finally sitting in front of them. When they eventually opened it, their eyes moved slowly down the page until they reached one section that made them stop completely. It wasn't the frightening conclusion they had imagined during those sleepless nights. Instead, the report revealed that something they had believed about themselves for years might have been based on incomplete information. And suddenly, an old family conversation they had never understood began making sense. But there was still one detail buried deeper in the report that they needed someone else to explain. That explanation came sooner than expected. Your soulmate contacted the medical office and asked about the specific finding, hoping they had misunderstood what they were reading. The answer didn't give them instant peace. It created another question. They were told that the report should be interpreted carefully and discussed with the appropriate medical professional, because a single finding couldn't tell the entire story by itself. Your soulmate listened closely, but one thought kept returning: someone from their past may have known there was more to this story. That possibility hit harder than the report itself. Why had nobody told them? Why had certain questions always been avoided? And why did one person in their family become strangely uncomfortable whenever this subject came up? Your soulmate realized this wasn't simply about receiving medical information anymore. It was about discovering whether something important had been kept from them. Then your soulmate did something nobody expected. Instead of confronting everyone immediately, they reached for their phone and pulled up something connected to you. For several seconds, they simply looked at it. The fear in their expression changed into determination, because whatever the full truth turned out to be, they no longer wanted you hearing a distorted version from somebody else. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is still another piece of information connected to that report, something your soulmate hadn't noticed during the first reading. It appears alongside an older detail from their history, and when those two pieces are placed together, they raise a question that could completely reshape what your soulmate believed about their own past. Before contacting you, however, they decided to make one final call. The person who answered already seemed to know exactly why your soulmate was calling, and their first words made your soulmate realize the secret had existed far longer than they imagined. The voice on the other end didn't sound surprised. That was what disturbed your soulmate most. Before they could even explain which medical report had arrived, the person quietly asked, "So you finally received it?" Your soulmate froze. Those words confirmed something they had been afraid to consider. Someone already knew there was a hidden question surrounding their medical history. They demanded an explanation, but instead of receiving one, they heard several seconds of uncomfortable silence. Then came a confession. Years ago, there had been information the family chose not to discuss because they believed keeping it quiet would protect your soulmate. But nobody expected your soulmate to eventually request medical testing that could bring those unanswered details back into the light. Now the report had done exactly that. And suddenly, your soulmate understood why certain conversations from childhood had always ended whenever they entered the room. But the confession still didn't explain the most important finding. Your soulmate returned to the report and read the wording again, more carefully this time. The medical information itself required professional interpretation, but one thing had become clear: the story they had been told about their past was incomplete. So they asked the person on the phone one direct question, the question everyone had apparently avoided for years. This time, there was no immediate denial. Instead, the person admitted that another document existed, something older than the report now sitting in your soulmate's hands. Don't skip, because this changed the entire direction of the mystery. The new medical findings hadn't created the secret. They had exposed a reason to reopen it. And when your soulmate asked where that older document was, the answer stunned them. Someone had deliberately kept it safe because they suspected this day might eventually come. Your soulmate didn't wait. They asked for that document to be sent immediately, but before ending the call, they mentioned you. Their voice softened. They said they couldn't move forward while keeping you outside something that might affect their future. Yet the person on the phone gave them an unexpected warning: read the old document before you tell them anything. That sentence stayed with your soulmate long after the call ended. Why would someone insist on waiting? What could possibly be inside an old record that mattered more than the medical report they had just received? Minutes later, another notification appeared on their phone. A file had arrived. Your soulmate opened it and found a date, several official details, and one name they recognized instantly. But there was another name beneath it, one they had never seen before. And when your soulmate realized who that unfamiliar person might be, the medical report suddenly became only half of the revelation. That unfamiliar name refused to leave your soulmate's mind. They read it once, then again, searching their memory for any forgotten conversation where it might have appeared. Nothing. Yet the name was attached to an old record connected directly to the questions raised by the new medical report. Your soulmate immediately called the same person back and demanded the truth. This time, there was no pretending. The person admitted that the name belonged to someone who had been part of your soulmate's earliest history, someone deliberately left out of the version they had grown up believing. But there was an important distinction: the medical report itself didn't magically identify that person or prove every family suspicion. It had simply revealed information that made your soulmate question the story they had been given. The older record was the missing piece, and now your soulmate wanted to know why it had been hidden. The answer was painfully complicated. Years earlier, the adults involved had made a decision they believed would prevent confusion and protect relationships inside the family. They agreed that certain details would remain private unless circumstances forced them into the open. Your soulmate had lived for years without realizing such an agreement existed. Now circumstances had changed. The recent testing had reopened questions nobody expected them to ask, and that unfamiliar name provided a direction for finding answers. Stay till the end, because your soulmate's next decision wasn't to accuse anyone. They wanted verification. They contacted the appropriate professionals, asked what could actually be established from the available records, and refused to accept assumptions as facts. That mattered, because one possibility was beginning to emerge, one capable of changing how your soulmate understood their own background. But before anyone could confirm it, another person needed to be contacted. Your soulmate stared at that unfamiliar name before finally searching for a way to reach them. What they discovered made their heart race: the person wasn't impossible to find. There was a trail. A current connection. Enough information to suggest that the unanswered chapter from years ago had never disappeared, it had simply continued somewhere beyond your soulmate's awareness. And then something even stranger surfaced. Your soulmate found evidence suggesting this person had tried to make contact once before, but the attempt apparently never reached them. Suddenly, the secrecy surrounding the old record looked very different. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate now had two mysteries instead of one. What could the medical findings ultimately establish, and who had prevented that earlier contact from reaching them? They decided they would uncover both answers before speaking to you. But just as they prepared to contact the unfamiliar person themselves, a message appeared from an unknown number. And its opening sentence made your soulmate realize that person might already know exactly who they were. The message contained only a few words, but your soulmate read them again and again. "I've been waiting for you to find out." There was no introduction, no explanation, just a sentence that suggested the stranger knew exactly what had happened. Your soulmate's first instinct was suspicion. How had this person gotten their number? Why contact them on the same day the medical report reopened questions about their history? Instead of responding emotionally, your soulmate asked one simple question: "Who are you?" The reply arrived almost immediately. The stranger gave the same unfamiliar name written on that old document. Then they mentioned a private detail from years ago, something your soulmate had heard only once during an unfinished family conversation. Suddenly, this wasn't just a random message. Someone from the hidden chapter of their past had stepped directly into the present, and they were ready to explain why. But your soulmate refused to accept a stranger's claims without proof. They asked why contact had never happened before. The answer was unexpected. According to this person, there had been more than one attempt. Letters had been sent. A message had been passed through someone else. Years later, another effort was supposedly made, but each time, communication stopped before reaching your soulmate. Don't skip, because this was where the old family secret became much harder to ignore. The stranger claimed they had eventually stopped trying because they were told your soulmate knew the truth and wanted no contact. Your soulmate knew that couldn't be right. They hadn't even known this person existed. Suddenly, someone had two completely different versions of the same history. One side believed silence was protection. The other believed the silence was rejection. And your soulmate had unknowingly lived between those stories for years. Then the stranger said something that shifted everything back toward the medical report. They claimed there was another record that could help clarify why your soulmate's recent findings had raised these questions in the first place. Your soulmate immediately asked to see it, but the stranger hesitated. They wanted to speak face to face first. That request made your soulmate uncomfortable, yet curiosity had become impossible to silence. They weren't searching merely for another document anymore, they were trying to understand who had shaped their past and why. Before agreeing to anything, your soulmate told the stranger they would verify every claim independently. The response came seconds later: "You should." "That's exactly why I kept everything." Then a photograph appeared on the screen. An old envelope with your soulmate's name written across the front. The date showed it had been prepared years earlier. But what truly shook your soulmate was the handwriting, because they recognized it from somewhere they never expected. The handwriting belonged to someone your soulmate had trusted almost their entire life. That recognition changed the atmosphere instantly. They enlarged the photograph, comparing individual letters with old cards and notes they still had saved. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the question was no longer whether someone close to them knew about the hidden history. The question was how deeply that person had been involved. Your soulmate messaged the stranger and asked what was inside the envelope. Instead of answering directly, the stranger sent another photograph showing the back, still sealed at the time the picture had been taken. Then came one unsettling explanation. The letter had supposedly been prepared for your soulmate years ago but never delivered. Why? Because someone decided the truth would cause too much disruption. And now the recent medical report had accidentally reopened the very secret that letter was meant to explain. Your soulmate felt anger rising, but they didn't let it control the next move. They needed facts, not another person's interpretation. So they contacted the person whose handwriting they recognized and asked a carefully worded question about the old envelope. Silence followed. Then came a quiet admission: yes, the letter was real. Yes, they knew about the unfamiliar name. And yes, they had participated in keeping certain information away from your soulmate. But their reason wasn't what your soulmate expected. They insisted there had been disagreement inside the family about what was actually true, and they feared handing over an unverified story could cause permanent damage. That explanation only created a larger mystery. If the adults themselves weren't certain, what had they been arguing about? And why had the new medical findings suddenly made everyone willing to reopen the subject? Then your soulmate asked the question nobody could avoid anymore. What exactly were you trying to protect me from discovering? The person hesitated before revealing that the old envelope contained information about your soulmate's biological family history, information that might explain why the recent medical report had raised unexpected questions. But they warned your soulmate not to treat any single record as absolute proof. Proper verification still mattered. Your soulmate agreed, yet one decision had already been made: no more secrets. They would gather the records, speak with qualified professionals, and learn what could genuinely be confirmed before telling you everything. But just before the call ended, the person mentioned one final detail that changed the stakes again. There wasn't only one sealed letter. A second envelope had also been prepared years ago, and unlike the first, it wasn't addressed to your soulmate. It carried another name, and when your soulmate heard whose name it was, they suddenly understood why everyone had been so afraid of the truth coming out. The second envelope was addressed to the person your soulmate had always believed knew everything about their beginning. For a moment, your soulmate couldn't speak. That meant the secrecy hadn't simply been built around them. Someone else close to the story had apparently been given information separately. Your soulmate asked whether that envelope had ever been opened. The answer came slowly: yes. Years ago. And what was written inside had caused an argument intense enough that everyone involved agreed to stop discussing the subject. Your soulmate immediately wanted the letter, but there was a problem. Nobody seemed certain where the original was anymore. Only one person claimed to have kept a copy, the same stranger whose name had appeared on the old record. Suddenly, meeting that person wasn't just about curiosity. They might possess the only surviving evidence of what everyone had been fighting over. Your soulmate agreed to speak with the stranger, but with one condition: the document had to be shared first so its claims could be independently checked. Minutes later, several scanned pages arrived. Your soulmate read them carefully, refusing to jump to conclusions. The letter described uncertainty surrounding part of their biological family history and referred to information that had never been properly explained to them. That was why the recent medical report had caused such panic. It hadn't delivered some magical answer by itself. It had raised a medically relevant question that happened to overlap with a secret the family had buried years earlier. Don't skip, because the final page contains something even more important, a recommendation from long ago that further verification should be completed if your soulmate ever needed certainty. Apparently, that verification never happened. Until now. That realization changed your soulmate's next move completely. They stopped chasing rumors and arranged to discuss the current findings with the appropriate medical professional, bringing the older records with them. For the first time, the pieces could be examined together instead of through frightened family memories. Your soulmate expected an immediate conclusion, but the professional was careful. Some assumptions could not be confirmed from those documents alone. More information would be needed. Yet one connection between the old history and the current report was significant enough to justify asking additional questions. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate finally understood that the truth wasn't hidden inside one dramatic sentence. It was emerging from several pieces that had never been placed together before. And when they asked what information would be needed next, the answer pointed directly toward one particular person from that unfamiliar branch of their past. But when your soulmate contacted them, that person revealed they had already completed something years ago that might provide the missing answer. What that person had completed years ago was a medical screening connected to their own family history, and they had kept the paperwork. Your soulmate felt the entire mystery tighten around one possibility. The older results couldn't automatically prove every family claim, but they could provide context that had been missing from the new report. The person agreed to share the relevant records through the proper channels, and for the first time, your soulmate stopped feeling trapped inside rumors. There was finally a path toward facts. But before sending anything, the person asked one question. Did they ever tell you why everyone became afraid of you finding out? Your soulmate said no. The answer that followed wasn't about shame or rejection. It was about fear that revealing uncertainty around their biological history would destroy the relationships that had raised them. Someone had decided silence was safer than allowing your soulmate to ask questions, and that decision had survived for years. Now your soulmate understood why the report had caused such a dramatic reaction. The medical findings hadn't declared that their entire identity was false. They had exposed a gap in the family history your soulmate had always been given, and that gap mattered enough to investigate properly. When the additional records were reviewed, another clue emerged. A detail documented years earlier appeared relevant to the question raised by your soulmate's current results. Still, the professional refused to turn possibility into certainty. Further verification would be necessary. Don't skip, because your soulmate respected that caution, and then made a decision nobody in the family could reverse. They authorized the next appropriate step. No more guessing. No more relying on old arguments, hidden envelopes, or half-finished confessions. Whatever could legitimately be established, they wanted to know it. But while waiting, your soulmate finally contacted you. They didn't explain everything yet. They simply said something unexpected had surfaced in their medical history and that they needed to tell you the complete story when they had confirmed information. Then came the line that revealed how deeply this had affected them: "I don't want secrets deciding our future." After sending it, your soulmate sat quietly, realizing that whatever the next results showed, their relationship with the past had already changed. Stay till the end, because the biggest answer still hadn't arrived. Later that same day, the medical office contacted your soulmate with an update. The additional information had been reviewed, and there was now enough reason to discuss the findings directly rather than through another message. An appointment was arranged. Your soulmate walked in expecting another complicated explanation. But when the professional placed the documents together and pointed to the one connection everyone had overlooked, your soulmate finally understood what the report might actually prove. The connection was hidden in plain sight. The professional carefully explained that the new report and the older family records contained a matching pattern significant enough to investigate, but not something your soulmate should interpret alone. For years, your soulmate had been given one simple version of their biological history. Now the documented information suggested that version might be incomplete. Their first question wasn't about themselves. It was about you. Could this affect the person I love or the future we're trying to build? The professional explained what could be known, what still required confirmation, and which assumptions should not be made. Your soulmate listened to every word. Then they realized something important. The frightening secret wasn't necessarily that something terrible had been discovered. It was that people had allowed fear to hide information your soulmate deserved to understand. But there was still one unanswered question. If the older records existed, why had nobody followed through on the recommended verification years ago? Your soulmate confronted the person who had helped keep the secret, and this time the answer came without resistance. Someone had been afraid that confirmation would force them to reveal the circumstances surrounding your soulmate's biological background. They believed silence would preserve the family. Instead, it created years of confusion waiting beneath the surface. Don't skip. Your soulmate then asked whether the unfamiliar person from the records had known about this decision. The answer was yes, but only partly. Different people had been told different versions, which explained the failed letters, the missing contact, and the contradictory stories. For the first time, your soulmate could see the entire pattern. The medical report hadn't created chaos. It had simply made the old silence impossible to maintain. Then the professional contacted your soulmate again. The additional verification they had been waiting for had produced information that could finally narrow the possibilities. Your soulmate returned, carrying every document they had gathered. This time, there were no secret phone calls happening behind them and no family member deciding what they were allowed to know. The findings belonged to your soulmate, and they were ready to hear them carefully. The professional began by clarifying what the results did not prove, then turned to what the combined evidence strongly supported. Your soulmate's eyes filled with emotion as years of strange conversations, hidden records, and unanswered questions suddenly connected. But before they called you, they asked one final question: does this mean the story I've believed about where I come from has to change? The response was careful, but clear enough that your soulmate immediately reached for their phone. And the first person they wanted to tell was you, because what had just been confirmed could change the conversation about your future together. Your soulmate held the phone for several seconds before calling you. They had imagined this conversation differently, maybe with fear, maybe with embarrassment, but now there was something steadier in them. The professional had explained that the combined record supported a meaningful correction to the family history your soulmate had always been given. It didn't erase who they were. It didn't suddenly make every rumor true. But it did confirm that important biological information had been missing from their story, information that should have been available when their medical history was first documented. Your soulmate finally understood why the report had triggered such panic around the family. The people who had hidden the past knew that one careful investigation could expose the inconsistency. And now that inconsistency could no longer be dismissed as imagination. Before telling you, however, your soulmate made one more call. They contacted the unfamiliar person whose name had started this entire chain of revelations and explained what had been confirmed. There was silence on the other end, followed by words your soulmate never expected to hear. Then they finally told you enough to find me. That sentence landed differently now. Your soulmate asked whether there was anything else still being hidden. The person admitted there was one final piece of the history they had intentionally withheld until professional verification was complete. Don't skip, because this was the part nobody wanted your soulmate discovering through speculation. Years ago, the uncertainty around their biological background had led to a decision that changed which family information appeared in the story they were raised with. The medical report hadn't proven every detail of that decision, but it had provided the reason your soulmate needed to uncover the records that documented it. Then your soulmate finally called you. Their first words weren't dramatic. They were painfully simple. I know why they were afraid of this report. They explained that the medical findings had uncovered a missing piece of their biological family history and that the truth was more complicated than what they had believed growing up. But before they could reveal the final detail, another notification appeared. The unfamiliar person had sent one last document, an official record your soulmate had never seen. Something huge is waiting for you, because this wasn't another letter filled with someone's memories. It contained names, dates, and a documented connection capable of clarifying the final unanswered part of the story. Your soulmate opened it while you were still on the phone. Their breathing changed. They whispered, "This is what they didn't want me to see." Then their eyes stopped on one particular line, and suddenly they understood why the medical report, the hidden envelopes, and that unfamiliar name had all led back to the same person. The name on that line belonged to someone your soulmate had heard about before, but never in connection with their own biological history. That was the shock. This person had always been described as a distant figure from the family's past, someone whose story supposedly had nothing to do with your soulmate. Yet the official record placed them directly inside the unanswered chapter the medical report had reopened. Your soulmate stayed on the phone with you while comparing the dates, the old letter, and the information they had received from the medical professional. Suddenly, several strange details lined up: the secrecy, the conflicting stories, and the desperate attempts to prevent old records from resurfacing. But your soulmate refused to make the final leap alone. They told you, "I need this verified before I tell you what I think it means." And that decision led them toward the one person who could explain why that name had been deliberately pushed out of the family story. When confronted with the official record, the person who had kept the secret finally stopped defending the silence. They admitted that years ago, questions had been raised about a biological connection within your soulmate's family history, but the adults involved never handled those questions openly. Instead, they built a simpler explanation and allowed your soulmate to grow up believing it. The recent medical findings exposed enough inconsistency to make that explanation impossible to accept without investigation. Don't skip, because your soulmate then asked the most painful question of all. Did you know I might someday discover this through my own medical records? The answer was yes. They had always known it was possible. That was why the arrival of the report created such fear. Nobody knew exactly what it would reveal, but they knew it might cause your soulmate to start asking the questions everyone had spent years avoiding. Then came the final twist before the truth could be fully established. The official record contained a reference number connected to another archived document. Your soulmate requested it, expecting another page of dates and signatures. Instead, the retrieved record contained a statement from the very person whose name had just been uncovered. It explained why they had disappeared from your soulmate's story and why they had once tried to make contact. Your soulmate read it slowly, becoming emotional as one sentence changed their understanding of the entire situation. This person claimed they had never willingly walked away. They believed someone else had made that decision for them. Something huge is waiting for you, because attached to that statement was evidence of one final attempt to settle the biological question years ago. An attempt your soulmate had never been told about. And when they saw what kind of verification had apparently been requested back then, they realized the answer everyone feared might have existed long before this new medical report ever arrived. The old verification request had never been completed, and that discovery left your soulmate with a question almost more painful than the secret itself: why would someone begin searching for the truth and then suddenly stop? The archived record showed that an appointment had been arranged, documents had been prepared, and the unfamiliar person had agreed to participate. Then, without explanation, everything ended. Your soulmate contacted the person who had guarded the family secret and asked what happened. This time, the answer came quietly. Someone had intervened. They believed confirmation would fracture the family permanently, so they convinced everyone that uncertainty was safer than certainty. Your soulmate couldn't understand that logic anymore. The silence hadn't protected them. It had simply delayed this moment until a medical report forced the unanswered history back into their life. Your soulmate returned to the medical professional with the newly discovered records and asked the only question that mattered now: what could actually be established through proper verification today? The answer gave them a clear path forward. No assumptions. No dramatic conclusions based on old letters. Only information that could be responsibly confirmed. Your soulmate agreed immediately. Don't skip, because there was something different about them now. Earlier, they had feared what the report might prove. Now they feared remaining trapped inside uncertainty even more. The appropriate verification moved forward, and the waiting began. During those hours, your soulmate thought about you constantly. They wondered whether this truth would change the way you saw them. Then they remembered what they had already told you: no more secrets deciding your future. Whatever came next, they wanted you beside the truth, not protected from it. Then the call finally arrived. Your soulmate was asked to return and discuss the information directly. They walked into that room carrying years of unanswered questions, but the professional immediately made one thing clear. The findings had to be understood precisely, without turning them into something they didn't prove. Your soulmate nodded and listened as the medical history, archived documents, and newly obtained information were explained together. One long-standing assumption about their biological background could no longer be treated as reliable. There was now evidence supporting a different family connection than the one your soulmate had been raised to believe. Their eyes filled with tears. Not because they suddenly became someone else, but because they finally understood why so many people had been afraid of this investigation. Yet one question remained before your soulmate could tell you the complete truth. They looked across the desk and asked, "So who does the evidence actually connect me to?" The professional turned toward the final document, pointed to a name your soulmate now recognized, and began explaining the connection everyone had spent years hiding. The explanation began with a detail your soulmate had almost overlooked. The name on the final document wasn't simply connected to an old family disagreement, it belonged to the branch of the family whose medical history matched the questions raised by the new report. That didn't mean every rumor from the past was suddenly proven. The professional carefully separated documented evidence from assumptions, explaining exactly what the available information supported. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. For years, they had wondered why certain details about their background never seemed to fit. Now there was a legitimate reason: part of the biological family history they had been given was incomplete. And the person whose name had been deliberately kept distant from their story was connected far more closely to that missing history than anyone had admitted. Your soulmate stepped outside and immediately called the person who had guarded the secret. There was no anger in the first question, only exhaustion. "Why didn't you let me know?" The response finally revealed the emotional reason behind years of silence. The family had feared that if your soulmate discovered the disputed biological connection, they would feel betrayed by the people who had raised and loved them. So everyone kept postponing the conversation, waiting for a better time that never arrived. Don't skip, because your soulmate's response changed everything. They said learning the truth didn't erase the love they had received, it only changed how they understood the choices made around them. What hurt wasn't the complexity of their history. What hurt was realizing that other people had decided they couldn't handle it. And then your soulmate asked whether there were any more hidden records. This time, the answer came immediately: one. That final record wasn't another medical result. It was a personal statement written years earlier by the person connected to the missing branch of your soulmate's biological history. Your soulmate received a scanned copy and began reading while sitting alone in the car. The writer explained that they had wanted the truth established properly, not through accusations or family rumors, and that they hoped your soulmate would eventually be allowed to decide for themselves whether they wanted contact. Near the bottom was a sentence that stopped your soulmate cold: "If you ever find this, know that I never wanted you to believe you were unwanted." Your soulmate covered their mouth, fighting tears. But something huge was still waiting, because beneath that statement was a handwritten note added later, a note mentioning a second person who apparently knew the complete story from the beginning. Your soulmate recognized that name immediately. They had spoken to this person countless times over the years, never realizing they had been holding the final missing piece all along. That familiar name changed everything because this wasn't someone hidden in an old archive. This person was still part of your soulmate's life. They had attended family gatherings, remembered birthdays, and listened quietly whenever questions about the past surfaced. Your soulmate couldn't understand how someone so close could know the complete story and never say a word. They called Emilia.